When the prospect of an Alien TV series was first rumored way back in February of 2019, the news was received with equal parts excitement and hesitation. After all, it wasn't immediately clear when such a series might take place, which, if any, existing characters might appear, and so on. All questions of lore aside, the biggest question remained. On television, would anyone be able to hear anyone scream, and how much would they care? Now, in 2025, we've seen the release of the first season of the inaugural Alien TV series, Alien Earth, and to say our hopes were met would kind of be an understatement. Alien Earth is another triumph from showrunner Noah Hawley, who pulled off similarly impressive television adaptations of films and properties like the Coen brothers' Fargo and Marvel's X-Men characters with the Fargo and Legion series, respectively. Still, despite Hawley's track record, there was some trepidation. This is largely due to the last film in the Alien franchise, 2024's Alien Romulus. And I get that I'm kind of in the minority on this one. I didn't really care for it too much. It just felt like a greatest hits movie at best and lazy fan service at worst. And so yeah, I mean, Alien franchise, not necessarily in the greatest place, going from Alien Covenant, a film that I love, to Alien Romulus. Oh boy. Never forgiving them for the AI necromancy. Jesus Christ. Romulus seemed to warn that the Walt Disney Company's tenure of Alien could be approaching something similar to how they've treated Star Wars over the last several years, which hasn't been great, to say the least. With this in mind, and with no plot synopsis or other details for Alien Earth released until just a month or so prior to the series premiere, it was easy to be afraid that the show might turn out to be yet another piece of lazy IP slop. And then it really could be game over, man.
Game over!
Fortunately, Hawley and his fellow writers and directors were in the pipe 5 by 5. Alien Earth isn't just good Alien franchise material, it's great science fiction, with the show feeling reminiscent of some of the most exciting and intelligent sci-fi series ever made. It's enthralling, exciting, thought-provoking, and it kept me interested, invested, wanting to watch week to week, and it was patient in the way that it wove together all these intersecting arcs and ideas. And that's in large part thanks to Hawley's ambition and auteurist tendencies, aspects which set him apart from most showrunners making television right now. As seen in Fargo and Legion, Hawley has a keen sense for in-depth character work in telling a long-form serialized story, both within a season, as seen in Fargo's anthology structure, and through multiple seasons, as seen in Legion. His shows also tend to have a heavily cinematic aesthetic, seen from their use of visual effects as well as their cinematography and editing. For instance, you can always tell a Hawley project by its penchant for quick cutaways, 70s style production design, and an abundance of cross dissolves. And oh my, when I say abundance, I mean holy shit, this show was just cross dissolve after cross dissolve in the most drawn out way possible, but I fucking loved it. It was a vibe. I got like sucked into it. It was really cool, I gotta admit. Although Hawley has made a feature film before, 2019's Natalie Portman astronaut film Lucy in the Sky, kind of an underrated movie, but I get why others didn't like it. It seems like his interests lie primarily in the world of true prestige television. Those projects which combine long-form serialized narratives with a greater emphasis on cinematic aesthetics. For a franchise as filmmaker-driven as Alien has been traditionally, Hawley has turned out to be the best possible choice to bring Alien to the small screen. But before we explore all the ways Hawley successfully adapted Alien, you're gonna want to get the Weyland-Yutanis of the world off your digital trail, and that's never been more possible with today's sponsor, Delete Me. Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that will remove your personal information that's being sold online. And while Weyland-Yutani might not exist in the real world, thousands of real data brokers do, and other nefarious corporations that are interested in your valuable data, scooping the personal information of millions of internet users and selling it. Delete Me believes in the right to own, manage, and remove your personal information, and since the ways companies collect, share, and sell your data are constantly changing, online privacy solutions must continuously improve and evolve to address these challenges. So, with Delete Me, you submit personal information you want removed from search engines, and Delete Me's experts find and remove it for you. It's that easy. Delete Me gets you detailed privacy reports in just 7 days. It removes all your personal data like your phone, name, age, and address from thousands of data brokers online. Delete Me monitors sites and repeats removal as needed, and customers can make custom removal requests as well. I've been using Delete Me's dashboard to monitor which sites have my information and to protect my privacy online, and they gave me this very detailed privacy report that had everything in there. It was great. I mean, it took me like, what, 5 to 10 minutes. It was so simple. They removed my information and sent me a detailed breakdown of how my info was found and removed, and even the number of hours I saved that I would have spent searching for and removing it myself. And I'm a busy guy. I don't want to be doing that. It's just mind-numbing. So another reason to use Delete Me. Privacy is in Delete Me's DNA. So what are you waiting for? Give Delete Me a try with 20% off consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/FilmSpeak and use promo code FilmSpeak at checkout, or use the QR code you see on screen. That's joindeleteme.com/FilmSpeak using code FilmSpeak, or use the QR code on screen here or in the description down below. Reclaim some of your privacy, and thank you so much to Delete Me for sponsoring this video. While Alien Earth is undeniably true to the franchise, it's much more than merely an average Alien movie stretched out to series length. Where the first 4 Alien films were built around a basic genre structure, Alien was the old dark house in space, as Ridley liked to call it. Aliens was a war movie, Alien 3 a prison movie, and Alien Resurrection a mad scientist film. The prequels, Prometheus and Alien Covenant, introduced a far more complex narrative while retaining the series' genre roots. Alien Earth joins Romulus in adopting a derelict investigation structure for its first 3 episodes, and then it adopts a deadly animals escape narrative for the back half of the season, a structure akin to the works of Michael Crichton, especially Jurassic Park. It also throws in a structural recreation of the original Alien in the 5th episode as a flashback, which is the series' most pronounced parallel to the films. And while at first I was a little concerned that they were being a bit too reverent of the original Alien film, and yeah, you can look at something like episode 5 and just be like, okay, cool, Noah Hawley, you got to make your fan film. I was actually impressed with how Hawley used that to engage in more interesting ideas. And I only think episode 5 is earned because it's not the focus of the series up until that point. Yet throughout all of this, Hawley and the other writers tell the story of a group of newly created hybrid beings, people who are synthetics implanted with the consciousness of humans. This experimental batch of hybrids are referred to as the Lost Boys by Boy Cavalier, who is the CEO of the Prodigy Corporation. That's right, in addition to Weyland-Yutani, the company seen in the previous Alien movies, Hawley introduces the concept of this future Earth of 2120 as being ruled by 5 corporations, with all prior governments having gone defunct. While Weyland-Yutani is preoccupied with obtaining creatures like the Xenomorph from distant planets for use in biological experimentation and presumably warfare, Prodigy is concerned with extending the human lifespan within this hybrid program, and perhaps is even interested in replacing humanity altogether with this form.
I'm running a multi-trillion-dollar business, and that's before people find out they can be immortal for a low, low price.
The Lost Boys isn't just a cheeky reference for Cavalier either, as the arrogant CEO is clearly obsessed with J.M. Barrie's 1904 play, Peter Pan, which the Scottish author later turned into a novel entitled Peter and Wendy in 1911. The subtitle of the play is The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, which is, of course, an indicative sentiment to apply to Boy Cavalier, who is portrayed by Samuel Blanken in a fashion that recalls real-life tech gurus like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, men who use their enormous wealth and influence in order to willfully act like children. Blanken's characterization is super captivating, and while the rest of the show's ensemble cast are doing fantastic work, Blanken's ability to make Cavalier so despicable yet utterly watchable is something to behold. You just fucking hate the guy, but watching him create chaos is such a delight. And it's fun to know deep down that he'll eventually get his. Since Cavalier sees him as a forever youthful and powerful Peter Pan figure, it's no surprise that he has chosen young tween children to be the test subjects for this hybrid program. These children are all suffering from some terminal illness or physical ailment, the better for their parents to sign their lives away for an experimental treatment that they're not given the details of. Cavalier's aims on the surface appear to be mercenary, with the hopes that the hybrids might become a new class of human, as in people wealthy enough to transfer their minds over to synthetic bodies can become immortal. He says that Prodigy is all about exploding human potential, but we all know it's really just about his own ego and making a profit. Yet, Cavalier's motivations are also entirely selfish, as he states in episode 2,
I want to talk to somebody smarter than me.
This statement has echoes of a certain Elon Musk, who continually paints himself as a lonely genius who would be delighted by someone meeting his alleged intellect, but is really just, another expression of unfettered arrogance. Because Cavalier, in seeing himself as a Peter Pan figure, is doing a tremendous amount of harm to these kids that even he won't acknowledge until it's too late. Even as he reads aloud from Peter Pan every night on the scheduled tropical island where Prodigy headquarters resides, an island called Neverland for obvious reasons, but one which also carries connotations of Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch. He either cannot, or more disturbingly, will not see the psychological damage being done to these kids' minds. It would be a lot just for tween minds to find themselves in fully adult bodies, but Cavalier is constantly pushing the hybrids beyond their limits, robbing them of their identities, forcing new ones upon them. And these lost boys and girls end up finding themselves truly lost. This is something that Dame and Arthur Sylvia can see coming, but are almost powerless to stop. And I love how as the series progresses, they start to feel that guilt seep in more and more, and how that impacts their actions. But that fatalistic tone is inherent in Hawley's Peter Pan analogy as well. In particular, Hawley really brings out the horror and tragedy inherent in the story and the Pan character. The idea that something which sounds like wish fulfillment on the surface, never growing up, being immortal, is actually horrific and even gross. I mean, I think the idea of Peter Pan, the story that Barry created, is more of a horror story than it really is a children's fantasy. There's something incredibly unsettling about the eternal meanness and immaturity about a kid who just won't grow up, his impish nature, and the fact that he rules an entire region. And while I've always loved and been fascinated by the story of Peter Pan, I think there's something interesting about how you view it as a kid versus when the truths start to emerge and come out as you mature into an adult. And Hawley beautifully taps into that. The cross-cutting between boys' reading of Barry with various unsettling images really emphasizes this idea in a powerful way. Another popular interpretation of Peter Pan is that Pan is some manner of ghost, a theory based upon the fact that the character was inspired by Barry's brother David, who died in a skating accident when he was 14 years old. So, with this analogy in mind, Neverland becomes a sort of afterlife realm, and the Lost Boys become the souls of other deceased children that Peter has brought to the island. Hawley makes this analogy more literal in Alien Earth, with these hybrid Lost Boys being humans who actually have to die in order to make their transition. Cavalier assumes that this process will result in the hybrids being his immortal property in perpetuity, floor models, as he puts it, to sell something bigger. But one of the themes of the show, as well as the entire Alien franchise, is the unpredictability of creation and the uncontrollable, unfeeling forces of nature. We could see this most clearly in the character of Nibs, played by Lily Newmark, through her ordeal with being so psychologically disturbed after her encounter with the T-Oculus creature that she undergoes a delusion that she's fallen pregnant. It's a character arc that recalls both the Alien series' preoccupation with unnatural pregnancies, as well as the gothic horror tradition of psychologically damaged women making their psychosis manifest. Nibs' arc not only serves to expose the psychological trauma inflicted on these hybrid beings by Prodigy, but also proves that these hybrids are not merely synthetics. After Arthur and Dame reset Nibs' memory, erasing the trauma she endured so that she can live a happy life with only positive memories. After being ordered to by Cavalier, she eventually discovers this betrayal. This puts her under a new trauma, for while the psychotic break caused by T-Oculus' attack may be gone, Nibs now feels similarly to how a young woman might feel after having an unwanted abortion. It's violating, and while yes, there is a traumatic incident that happened, it was part of who they were. It was something she was reconciling with and was allowing her to better understand herself and the way that she processes emotions, not just positive ones, but negative ones as well. They were trying to prevent her from becoming an adult, even though they wanted to treat her like an adult, which is really true for all of the kids in this series. Of course, one could view all the hybrids as abortions after a fashion, given how they all slowly but surely moved away from their old human selves and lives. This is another parallel with the idea of Neverland in Peter Pan. Just as Peter can no longer remember his parents, just as other characters find themselves forgetting, the hybrids themselves in Alien Earth seem to be having the same type of experience. The most fascinating hybrid, though, is of course the lead character of the series, the one who brings all of these ideas, these themes together. Wendy, aka Marcy, played by the brilliant Sydney Chandler, who I had absolutely no idea was the daughter of Kyle Chandler, but you know, you see him side by side and you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. First and foremost, Chandler does an exceptional job at playing a young teen in an adult body. Everything from her wide-eyed curiosity, youthful exuberance, and the way she carries herself physically contributes to the uncanny valley of her character, as well as all of the Lost Boys, making them both undeniably human yet eerily unnerving. It's a distinctly sci-fi horror take on a trope that is more often than not comedic. Think Tom Hanks in Big or Jamie Lee Curtis in Freaky Friday. While there's certainly a lot of comedy to be mined from the concept in the performances here too, Chandler's work as Wendy helps ground the idea more firmly in a psychological and philosophical space. Hawley is being subversive with the character in terms of her place in alien lineage too. Ever since Sigourney Weaver emerged as as the heroine of Alien, the franchise has made sure to feature strong brunette women in the leading roles, and Chandler fits the mold on the surface. Yet, the series and Chandler keep Wendy a bit of a wild card as often as possible. At times, we're scared for her, sure, but at other times, we can find ourselves scared of her too. This isn't just due to the less than humane behavior demonstrated by other synthetics in the Alien films, although, you know, that's part of it. Wendy is unsettling because throughout the first season, she begins to become increasingly detached from not just her old life and her old self, but perhaps humanity as a whole. This process begins in little ways. After all, as David quoted Lawrence of Arabia in Prometheus,
"Big things have small beginnings."
Wendy starts manipulating the environment around her, just electronic devices at first, yet her range seems incredibly far-reaching. She's able to deny her brother Joe's transfer out of the Prodigy security service from miles away. What's more, this choice initially seems like the selfish act of a child, but can also be seen as a more mature act of manipulation. Wendy's asserting of herself only grows with each episode until the middle of the season, in which she's able to charm, if not communicate with, a chest burster born from Joe's surgically removed collapsed lungs. By the end of the season, Wendy has seemingly gained some mastery over the language of the Xenomorph, an ability which hasn't been approached since the Ripley 8 clone similar gift in Alien Resurrection. Due to her sense of betrayal regarding her past with Joe, her old life as a terminally ill girl, and her new environment in which she feels a kinship with the Xenomorph more than anyone else, and the other alien creatures that Cavalier has decided to steal and incarcerate from Weyland-Yutani, Wendy encourages the Lost Boys to stage a full-on coup, and it seems that the only side she and they are on may be their own. Quick aside, I know one of the big complaints of the show has been that people feel like the characters are acting stupid or immature, and to that I just have to say that, like, you realize that the majority of the characters in this show are kids. Even Boy Cavalier, for as smart as he thinks he is, he's still an impulsive child. Of course he's going to be reckless with the power because he's selfish and views himself as invincible. He doesn't really care about anyone else. He's like an only child wanting to play with his toys, and everything else doesn't really matter. And also, if you're an Alien fan and you take issue with how dumb the adult characters act in these movies, or I guess this show, I mean, like, this isn't a new thing. This has been present from the first film. It just harkens back to Ridley's utter disdain and contempt. He thinks that for as brilliant as humanity is, we're also pretty stupid. And to be fair, is he wrong? And Alien Earth upholds that legacy. As a matter of fact, the majority of the characters in Alien Earth are pretty damn morally ambiguous. While the rest of the Lost Boys aren't ever intentionally malicious, they're either unstable like Nibs, led astray like Curly and Slightly, or are just so naive as to be untrustworthy, kinda like with Smee. Cavalier clearly only has selfish intentions with few scruples, and his subordinates follow suit, especially Adam Eanes and Kirsch. Kirsch, as played by the wonderful Timothy Olyphant, represents another corner in the triangle of synthetic characters along with Wendy and Morrow. He is the most traditional synthetic in the sense of the prior android characters in the franchise: cold, determined, unbothered, and so on. Yet, Kirsch may be the most pure scientist synth we've seen in the franchise, even more so than Ash, who literally fell apart due to his corporate-mandated deception, and David, who obviously has a deep well of motivation behind his actions. It's a delight to see how Oliphant makes Kirsch as much of a wild card as he is, all while the character remains steadfast. Then there's Morrow, arguably the most fascinating character in the entire season, played brilliantly by Babu Sise, a character who feels in parallel with Wendy. Like her, he's an ostensibly human person who finds himself becoming more and more robotic, or at least emotionally distant. After his experiences on the USC SS Maginot, a saga in which he's coded as the Ash of the ship in the way it essentially remakes Alien, he then feels like a dark mirror of Ripley because, like her, he also is revealed to have lost his daughter during his mission for Weyland-Yutani. While Ripley is galvanized by her loss to try and obtain justice against the Xenomorphs in the company, as well as perhaps building a new found family of her own, Morrow is motivated to become a pure company man, dedicating his services to Yutani to complete his original mission and repossess the deadly creatures brought back from God knows where. In losing his tether to humanity in his daughter, he's taken on a more nihilistic view. He's stopped caring about everyone else and really needs to believe that his work for the company, that his time spent away from his daughter on the mission meant something. Even though deep down, you can clearly see that he knows it doesn't. We see how this causes Morrow to intensely focus on the things he can control, the mission, loyalty to the company, because of the thing that he couldn't control. In episode 5 specifically, you could see how he's really trying to suppress his humanity, his feeling of loss, his sadness and despair. He truly resents the inherent empathy of humans and thus tries so hard to suppress his own to deal with his loss. It's easier to operate without emotion, cold, logically, clinically. Emotions don't really serve any purpose. purpose. It only serves to bog you down or steer you in the wrong directions. You aren't thinking clearly. At least that's how he views it. Even when he's offloading data in episode 3, he's clearly affected by everything that's happened. He can't completely shut off his humanity, and that's because he's a cyborg. He probably wishes he could be a synthetic, but it's not in the cards, at least until he can fully transfer his consciousness over. And then you could also see how he resents the hybrids, because that essentially could have been the thing that saved his daughter's life had he been around on Earth. Ultimately, Morrow is an example of the kind of person you have to become in order to climb to the top of the ladder, in order to survive in this shit show of a world that all the characters inhabit. And again, that's sort of what we see happening with Wendy as well. The situation with Nibs and the wiping of her memory sends Wendy into a bit of a spiral where she is beginning to see the cruelty of humanity, its desire to take things apart just to see what's inside, to observe, experiment without actually helping anyone, playing God for the fuck of it. She's seeing this all while processing the emotions that come with it. And as a result, I think she comes to the conclusion, similar to Morrow, that she'd rather be closed off, devoid of emotions, than forced to suffer in a cruel existence with them. If they can go in and reprogram Nibs without her permission, without saying yes, then what's the point? If she's nothing more than a machine, then maybe she's better off viewing things as a machine. Now, naturally, this mentality shifts a bit with the arrival of the Xenomorph, and she sees that maybe it's just that humanity sucks and I can be more empathetic to others like me, and that's where she places her emotional emphasis. These corporations, Prodigy, they only want her to present as human. They're not actually interested in all of the baggage that comes with being a human, and with the technology they have, they can just make it go away. They can keep them children forever. And that really starts to get to Wendy. She fully believed that she was just as human as anyone else, albeit in a different body, but she still felt human, at least in her soul. But then she starts to harp back on things that Kirsch said earlier in the season about not having use for emotions, about seeing the world as it is instead of feeling it. One of Hawley's best, most ironic choices in the show is that Wendy's brother, Joe, is the only morally sound character, and as such, the other characters are constantly seeking to turn him into a victim. Actor Alex Lothar ups the moral ante with his performance, which is constantly sympathetic and innocent, a characterization that fits with Joe being not a violent grunt, but a medic and a healer. In an average show, Joe would be our protagonist, an outsider who finds himself drawn into a dark, deadly world. In Alien Earth, he's both physically and morally obsolete. This theme, the notion that so-called regular human beings are old news and a new breed of humanity is dawning along with other forms of life, helps make Alien Earth feel that much more like a continuation of the themes that Hawley had been exploring in Legion. Both shows have a distinctly 60s, 70s aesthetic to them, from the production design on to some of the references made in it. For instance, while Legion had a character named Syd Barrett, after the Pink Floyd guitarist, the theme song for Alien Earth is Hawley himself singing a cover of Cream's 1967 hit, Strange Brew. Earth connects to Legion in other ways too, especially the fact that both shows largely take place in secluded or remote locations where a group of misfits or otherwise outlandish folks reside. And then there's the more human than human theme of both series, which takes a look at what happens to people with greater abilities than humans when forced to integrate or conform to a largely human societal structure. There are more pop culture references threaded throughout Alien Earth too. Of course, the 5th episode of the series, a flashback detailing the deadly fates of the Maginot, is one big reference to Ridley Scott's Alien. I mean, it's more than a reference, it's just a recreation. Done very well, but still. Yet, there are infamously more modern references peppered throughout Alien Earth too. In the 2nd episode, Joe finds a bit of memorabilia, a baseball signed by Reggie Jackson, who doesn't just make him reminisce about his father, also played by Hawley, but could also possibly be a reference to Jackson's appearance in The Naked Gun, in which the baseball player is hypnotized into believing he must kill the queen. And we know about queens when it comes to aliens, right folks? I also think what's brilliant about that Reggie Jackson ball scene is that it represents the impermanence of life, the great accomplishments made by an individual in a moment in time. Its fleeting nature is why it's special. It's what makes the artifact, the ball, live beyond Reggie. Also, how that history is linked to memory, specifically Joe's memory of his father, is proof that immortality does not come by way of synthetic hybrids or transferring of consciousness and whatnot. No, it comes by way of what you do with the limited time you have on this earth. That's how you become a legend. What's interesting about Wendy, specifically in her relationship with Joe, is that as a synthetic, she could could be an artifact of the current time, the evolution of the Reggie Jackson ball that allows us to remember someone. But what point does the hybrid become therapeutic for someone like Joe versus viewed as someone with their own agency, an individual, a person onto themselves? It starts to get a little muddy there, and that's part of the brilliance of the debate here. In order for something to live on, must there be impermanence, soul, fused into it? But back to the idea of music. Every episode ends with a needle drop, and every song generally fits the genres of alt-rock or metal music. In addition to these songs lightly commenting on the mood or actions of the final scenes of each episode, they also have some clever layers to them too, most notably Black Sabbath's The Mob Rules. That song was originally written and recorded in the 1981 heavy metal movie, an animated adaptation of the famous sci-fi fantasy adult magazine, which was a big influence on Ridley Scott when making Alien. Also, the movie featured several segments written by Dan O'Bannon, the original writer of what became Alien. Clearly, Hawley knows his Alien history. He's a fan, but he's a fan who gets this series down to its core. And then there's the good old Ice Age continental drift, which is insane that that's the film they chose to weave into the fabric of this series. This particular reference in Alien Earth caused a small stir online when the episode released, resulting in reactions that ranged from baffled to delighted. The reference may seem out of place on paper, like I mentioned, sure, but in context, I think it works very well, with the 2012 sequel acting as a core memory for both Marcy and Joe's seemingly happy childhood. Its use is both as an emotional touchstone for Marcy after she becomes Wendy, as well as an indicator that the two beings, once siblings, may only have a distant memory left in common. And then there's the fact that both the Ice Age films and Alien Earth concern worlds in transition. While Ice Age depicts one world being replaced by another, Earth's prequel status is something the series absolutely has in mind, as all the references to Scott's Alien, which occurs just 2 years after the events of the series, are not idle. The fact that Weyland-Yutani named their ship the Maginot refers to the French Minister of War during the 1920s, André Maginot, and his concept for the Maginot Line, which was to be a series of weapon installations to stop Nazi Germany from invading France. Of course, it didn't work, but the point is that the Maginot Line was a fortification process intended to help with an oncoming war. Given that Weyland-Yutani are spoken about countless times in most of the Alien films set in the timeline's future, and that we don't hear anything about the other 4 world power corporations as established in Earth, we could infer that Weyland-Yutani is gearing up for a literal hostile takeover, which would explain why they're so hot on obtaining biological weapons instead of, as Prometheus Peter Weyland wanted, just immortality. By the way, 2012, the year Ice Age Continental Drift was released, is also the year that Scott's Prometheus hit theaters too. And just to finish the thought, the Ice Age films do technically follow the adventures of a bunch of wild creatures. I mean, you know, if we're just throwing everything out there. But good God, how did we go for this long in the video without mentioning the titular star of Alien Earth? As you can tell, this series has so much going for it that it has no need to relentlessly milk the Xenomorph for entertainment value, and thus they're used a very appropriate amount instead of being the sole highlight, as in something like, you know, Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Yet neither the Xenomorph nor the other creepy crawly creatures in the series are merely incidental, because they all have important parts to play. Hell, in the second episode alone, the alien acts as a political commentary unto itself, as it feasts on a party of wealthy elites dressed in wigs who refuse to leave the building the Maginot crashed into after being warned. In fact, though the Xenomorph isn't in every scene of every episode, the show in its entirety is a look at 2 of the biggest themes in the franchise: survival and evolution. The Xenomorph, referred to as a perfect organism since the very first film, is an unholy ideal in the Alien universe. Its entire existence is in service of continually perpetuating itself. And not only is each stage of the life cycle incredibly difficult to kill, but it's very good at killing too. Though only certain factions of humanity know of the Xeno's existence, it seems that human beings, at the behest of corporations, are attempting to emulate the Xenomorph. Morrow, for example, has made the choice to graft multiple mechanical elements to himself in order to become more human than human. And not just a better organism, but a more deadly one too. He seems to be bleeding empathy the more non-human he becomes, while Wendy, whose empathy only grows with her discovery of the mistreatment of others, is ironically becoming more ruthless in service of perpetuating those she deems worthy of propagation, namely her fellow hybrids, the other creatures in the menagerie, and the Xenomorph, which makes her almost a queen. In general though, the Xenomorph and other besties, particularly the the biggest non-human breakout star of the show, the eyeball monster called T-Oculus, are used in the series in a way that makes them much more sympathetic than they're usually portrayed. Even in the AVP films, the Xenomorphs are loathsome creatures, and God knows there's no love lost between them and Ripley. Yet, Wendy's growing connection to them, learning their language, and by the last episode of the season, bringing them under her ostensible control, is one of the rare times the franchise has taken a look at the alien the way Ash originally sees it, as a perfect, albeit hostile organism. It's an approach to the creature and the franchise in a way that feels as fresh as the rest of the series, but isn't ignorant of what's come before. After all, David considered the Xenomorph and his other creatures his children too. And I think there's also something to be said about the idea that it's our environment, it's the way that we treat things that we don't know, the things that we're afraid of, that ultimately determine their attitudes towards us. We see that a lot in Ridley's prequel films, and with David specifically in Covenant. His last words to Daniels is that,
I think if we are kind, it will be a kind world.
he wants the Xenomorphs and humanity to coexist, but is that even possible? Is it contradictory? Will the Xenomorphs just usurp humanity altogether? Who knows? And we'll never really know unless Ridley Scott makes that third prequel movie. What the final episode makes clear is that the status quo has been completely upended. The inmates are running the asylum, in other words, and it acts both as a reckoning for Cavalier and his band of manipulative corporate stooges, as well as an ominous warning about how much humanity, if not Earth, is changing and how far it might go. So, where does the franchise go from here? Obviously, we hope that Alien Earth gets a second season and multiple more seasons. Enough seasons so that Noah Hawley can tell the rest of the story, as the first season's final episode leaves nothing close to being resolved. We know that Romulus will be getting what is allegedly a direct theatrical sequel, which probably means another adventure with Rain and Andy, but, you know, Fede Alvarez isn't going to return to direct it, so yeah. He is a co-writer on the film, however, and he was allegedly told by Ridley Scott to avoid certain elements due to Scott possibly being interested in exploring them with another film in the series. If that means we may be finally in store for the conclusion of David's prequel saga, then I mean, fuck yeah, please, I've been wanting that since 2017. Then there's the Wrinkle of the Predator franchise, which is also in a pretty good place. In addition to that series being given a new lease on life thanks to Prey and Killer of Killers, this fall's Predator Badlands makes an implicit connection to Alien explicit, as Elle Fanning's character has been revealed to be a Weyland-Yutani synthetic. All of this implies that the Alien franchise is becoming a cinematic universe unto itself, with Earth being one part of an ongoing multi-medium series that will be jumping around in time and letting creators do their own thing, even as each new project is in conversation with each other. What this means for the future of Alien Earth isn't certain, but what feels sure is that this isn't the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the DC Universe, in the way those films and shows are expected to work to connect with one another. Alien's DNA has always been auteurist artistic vision baked into it, so even though there may be an odd issue with the timeline or the lore in the future, chances are that it won't matter all that much. Alien Earth is living proof of this. It makes the show that much more engaging that it's not trying to conform to any franchise demands, but is instead relentlessly doing its own thing. Despite debate continually raging online about what Alien films rank as the best or the worst, it feels like Alien fans aren't all that demanding either. They want horrible, goopy beasts, they want strong characters, they want some gorgeous cinematography, and some bizarre environments, and most of them will end up pretty happy. The fact that Noah Hawley and his cast and crew is going this hard with Alien Earth so far is a great indicator that the series will not only continue to do right by the franchise, but that it may end up being one of the best sci-fi shows ever made all its own. If the latter seasons of Legion, one of the best sci-fi shows ever made, are any indication, things could get even wilder and more imaginative from here. For right now, it's a great time to be an Alien fan, and it turns out that Earth can hear us scream. Screaming for more, that is.